Hello, welcome back to the channel. We're going to continue working on the Mercruiser 120 horsepower Chevy 153 engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the head back together, wrap that up, finish that up, and then install the crank bearings for the crank. And we're going to do a PlastiGauge to see the clearances for the bearings with the new bearings. And then the crank came back from polishing. So that turned out pretty nice. We'll take a look at that as well. Then we'll do, like I said, the PlastiGauge, and we'll see what our clearances are. You might find that informative if you never used that before or whatever. So next thing is that we'll install the cam bearings, the bearings for the cam. We'll do the cam gear, the gear that goes on. We're going to hammer that on. And then the crank gear and the cam gear are matched together, like they're the same style or whatever. I didn't show it on the video putting the crank gear on, but it's just I heated it up and with a torch and hammered it on, just the same as I did with the crank that you're going to see in the video. But anyways, enough of my rambling. Thank you very much, liking and subscribing and following along. Even though you might not be into Chevys or you're here to find out about Chevy engine. But thank you very much and I appreciate it. It's another long video, but it might be informative to you. So get your popcorn, your favorite beverage, and enjoy the video. And I'll see you at the end. So we lapped all the valves like I already showed. So now I'm starting to put in the springs and the valves themselves into the head. Using the same tool that I was using before, but interesting thing that I found out while installing these ones on the wrong end first, and I realized I put them in the wrong end because I had the head flipped over. One was over here where number 4 of where the valves were sitting here, so I screwed that up, but it was a good thing though because this is what I found out. So here's the valve here, okay, and we have our valve seals. These are new ones that came in a kit. So the valve seal, I'm going to put some oil on here whenever I install it and everything, but I wanted to show you first. So there's your seal here that goes on top. Then you have your 2 keepers right here. So if you look here, because I won't be able to show you this whenever I install it, but here's your keeper, and here is your other side of the keeper. So you can see they actually rest on top of the seal, like they mate right up to it. So what you have to do is you put your valve in, we'll put the spring in, and then we'll compress it, and then we'll install the seal and the keeper, which before I put it in, I put the seal in, I put the valve in and put the seal on, and then I put the spring on, and the spring, this piece here, the retainer that holds on, comes down like this, and it popped the seal off of the end of the valve. So it actually pushes it off. So you have to compress the spring and then put your seal and your keeper on. So that's what I'm going to show you right now on this valve here. So you got our, I always like to put a little bit of assembly lube on the valve just so when it starts up it's not completely dry. Which I guess it would be dry anyways, not too much oil on it, but just a little dab of assembly lube, just so it's on there. Because I really don't like putting parts together dry. So, let's put our valve in here. Go find it, and kind of push it there. There it is up into the hole there. Then we'll get our valve assembly, but these are neat here. Like they have a valve, it's a double spring, a double spring with another spring on the inside, which is actually a pretty soft spring, so it's really just the outside spring. And then there's a cap that goes on there, and then you have this piece that holds your retainer in. So take that, put it here, we'll install our tool. Line it up with the valve here, the front piece. I like to put the pointy part on the other end into the center of the valve. Center that in there, squeeze it, locks into position, and then if you could see that, you can kind of reach in there and get the seal on, and then get your keeper on. Okay, that's what I'm going to do next here. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit of oil on there. Just it'll help oil the seal a little bit so it's not dry. Again, I don't like putting anything together dry on engines. So then just kind of push down on the spring a little bit here to get it centered, so it's easier to get your little seal on there. So I'd get it started, and then I use a little screwdriver. Push the seal into where it's supposed to be. And then get your keepers. Again, the oil will help keep the keepers in place while you're doing this. Oh, it kind of helps, I guess. Okay, while the spring is centered on there, and the keepers, hopefully they stay. They stayed on the other two, but this guy don't want to stay. There you go. So it's in there, and you can release. Ah! Let me grab this one. I'll give that one a cleaning. Put it back into the fold there. Like everything on this channel, nothing is straight and perfect. There's no editing going on here. You guys know. All right, so there's that. See, I'm gonna have to hold it. There you go. Maybe this one will stay. There you go. And once it starts going, then it'll kind of stay. There you go. So now there's that one on. It's centered in there. It has a seal on the inside. It should be centered inside there, right behind the keepers, and it should be all good now. All right, so I'm going to continue doing all the rest of them. I'll be back. So the head is done, all put back together, cleaned up, got our valves in there with our seals, and everything's cleaned up. So the head is now done and complete. I did clean the surface over on the other side where it hits and everything. So that's nice and flat. That's good enough for flat for us. And so the head is done. So let me go see what the next thing we're going to do. And it'll be roll it into that one next. Okay, so we're putting in the cam bearings going across. That's your main thrust bearing down here. And then down here are your other connecting your crank bearings. And then this bearing down here I'm going to put in here. So I thought I'd show you the last one. So into the block itself, you see these little oil galleys right here? That's how you know you're putting the right one on the bottom, because they should have a hole in them. So that goes into your block. Then see, this one has no hole in it. It should be in your lockdown block. So it goes like that. So then this one goes in here. And just make sure you have the holes are going to line up with here and here. These bearings seem to have an extra set of holes in them, which may be for a different engine. I'm not sure. But this will be using the bottom hole down here. But this will be also the tang here. There's a little tang. It goes into that one as well. But just so you make sure you've got the right one, you have the holes, the ones that are going into the holes in the crank. Into the block, I mean. So you just kind of take them. I cleaned everything. I took the bearing. I didn't clean them because they're already clean. They're in a pretty clean package when they come, so just going to push this in. Go. Now, I've taken a soft little mallet. I'm sure it's not the right way to do it, but this is the way I do it or whatever. I'm going to do it. Just tap it. Just to make sure it's totally seated And this is flat with this side. It's probably more particular than most guys do, but I like to make sure they're completely in there just with a nice little tap, and they're completely smooth. Okay, so our case bearings are now in. So next we're going to do the bearing caps. So this is we're doing the bearing caps right here. And I did the same thing. You can see there's no oil holes on the ends here, on the caps themselves. I'll show you there. You just kind of, then you know you got the right bearings when you put them in. So this is the thrust bearing on the end of the crank on the engine. And this one was kind of a snug fit, same as on the block itself. So it's all good. So I made sure these were nice and clean and put those in there. Just did a little tap to get them in there so they're nice and flat and level. I also like to use, let me show you. There you go, a machinist square or a machinist ruler that's really flat. Just kind of see if they're in there flat totally. You probably don't really need to do this too much, but it just makes it in my mind so it's a little bit, so I know it's smooth going in there, because when you put the cap on, it'll kind of push the bearings into place. But I figured do this just to be a little extra one. Okay, so we got this one's done. So let's do the next one here. 2 bolts there. I guess I'll clean that. I guess I didn't clean that one up too much. So I also like to use brake clean to clean things up. There you go. So that's all clean now. Grab one of the bearings out of the new bearings, and you can see the tang is here in the middle. There's also a little one over here. I'm not sure what that's for, but we got the tang in the middle, and this one goes into the middle. So we'll take this, line it up there into the center, kind of give it a little push. Then I'll take my little hammer, just give it a little tap, going back and forth, and there you go. Some people, I'm sure they do not use the hammer, and I'm sure I'll get yelled at for it, but you can see there it's nice and flat inside the bearing cap. Where's our straight edge again? Where did I put it? There you go. Take that, put it on there, and there you go. So the bearing caps now are done, and I also numbered them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is also going to be, this is a 5 bearing engine. So unlike the Land Rover one, it's only a 3 bearing. So that's also an upgrade as well. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to continue getting these together, and we'll see what, probably do the crank next. The crank has come back from polishing from Napa Auto Parts. So what they did is they polished them up, and they look pretty good. They definitely look a lot better than what they were before. And this one, I think it was this one that had the line going around it. There's a little bit of a rust line on this side, but it's all polished up. They turned out pretty good. So they're definitely smooth. There's nothing on them or anything. And they also polish the connecting rods too. They do all the whole crank going across. So everything's looking pretty good right here. So I gave the main journals a cleaning. And like I said, we got the caps in there. I'm going to lay this in there all clean, so then we can do the PlastiGauge right here. So what we're going to be doing is PlastiGauge, if you know what this is. If you don't, well, let's take a look at it. So what it is, if you look right here, you can also Google it too, but this is a round piece of plastic, around a soft plastic, or yeah, soft plastic. So what it is, when we put this in there, I'll show you on the engine. So what you do is you cut a piece of this off, and you lay it along the length of your bearings right here. You just lay a little piece on there, maybe about 1 inch wide, or less than that actually. I'm not sure how wide that is, but as wide as that. And you take that and you put your caps on, and we'll torque them down, you know, all of them around, all of them across, and it crushes this little piece of plastic. So the plastic crushes, and there's a thickness to it. The thickness of it can be measured with these little charts here. So the little chart, once it's crushed, will tell you how close is the bearing gap that you have. So if you see here, the green one here has a size of 0.01 to 0.03, so that would be your gap. And if you use a green one, sorry, I'm going all over the place. So if you have a gap of 0.02 to 0.06 inches, then you would use a red one in between there. So if we look in our service book here, it has, here's our crankshaft. We got our main bearing clearance, and that's our crank bearing. So we got production and service. Production has a real tight tolerance right here. So we got a max of 0.004 or 0.1 millimeter max. So that's the max space that we can have for our bearings to be serviceable. So to be as 0.4, we'll use to the red one, and hopefully we'll be able to fall in between here, the 0.02 and the 0.06, once we tighten the caps down and it crushes that down. So if we had a tighter tolerance, you can use this one. It has 0.01 to 0.03 inches. And this was a kit that I got. It came with all three of these in a kit. Part number is 96475, PlastiGauge kit, All-Star Performance. And they give you instructions too on how to do it all here. And there's tons of videos on how to do this. So I'll just give you a quick overview. So I'm going to go with the red. I'm going to cut off the pieces of these and lay them on the crank bearings, and I'll be back. Bearing caps are on and they're torqued down, so now I'm going to take them off and we'll measure the PlastiGauge, I mean. But it's pretty neat here. You can see there's arrows pointing to the front of the engine. They're pointing this way. And I noticed that after I already marked them. So bearing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I have a plus here, so I know I put these on the right side. The numbers go towards the plus on there. But that was just my markings I put on, so I make sure I put them on right. And then I realized that there's an arrow actually pointing this way. So it's good to number your bearing caps just so you put them in the exact same place they were originally. So I'm going to take these off and we'll give it a look. Oh, also make sure you do not turn the crank whatsoever once you have it torqued down and you have the PlastiGauge in there, then it'll mess it all up. Okay, so we'll take our handy dandy little gauge reader, and you can see, hopefully you'll be able to see, but you see there's a red mark. It says 2,000ths. Let me see if I can point to it here a little better. So that width of the red is 2,000ths gap on your bearings, the space in between that's left over. So let's see where we at here, 2,000ths, and then we got, see it gets a little bit smaller and it's 3,000ths. Then smaller would be 4,000ths, even smaller would be 5,000ths, and even smaller would be 6,000ths. So that means if you have a 6,000ths, you'd have less crush on there, so it would still be skinny. But the more flat you get would be the wider the piece gets wider, the smaller the space is, so it crushes it wider. So hopefully you'll be able to see this, but I don't know if you can because everything's shiny. But okay, so what I found is I think we're right at, let me get there, right on 3,000ths on most of it. Like you could kind of see we're lined up pretty good at 3,000ths. And let's take a look at this one. So that's It's hard to hold it there in place and hold the camera. So that one's, it seems almost a little bit wider than 3/1000ths at the 3/1000ths mark. There you go. So it's almost in between 2 and 3 because it's skinnier than the 2 mark, 2/1000ths, but it's wider than the 3/1000ths. So I would say it's in between there. So for the thrust bearing here, let me see. Let me line it up. Hard part's showing you guys this. So we're in between 3 and 2 on this one as well. If you can see it. It's a little bit skinnier than the 2/1000ths, but it's wider than the 3/1000ths. So I would say it's 25, almost in between there. If I block the light, there you go. See there? So our bearings are within spec, which is way within spec. So you can actually see in, I actually had to buy this book because it's a boat motor. So it's a marine engine GM 4-cylinder Mercruiser, book number 10. And it actually tells you to do just what we just did with the PlastiGauge and everything. So it actually wants you to do that in the book itself to measure it. So that's good news. Our bearings are all within spec and they're good to go for the main crank bearings. I should have showed you, but also inside the bearing cap, inside here, you can see it's inside of each of the caps as well. It's a little bit harder to measure whenever it's on a curve going this way, up and down. So it still measures out to within spec, so that's pretty good. I figure I'd show you that because now an important thing to show now is that we need to clean up all of our PlastiGauge off of all of our surfaces so we're nice and clean when we put this back together. Measuring thrust bearing space in between this ring here and the bearing down in there. I measured 4/1000ths, and our crank end play is 2 to 6,000, so we're good there, 0.04. We're going to be removing the timing gear on the end of the crank. This is the crank itself, so we got it up here. I got 2 5/16 bolts. I'm pretty sure they're 5/16, and a piece of a 3-jaw puller here, and a piece of angle iron. I have 2 holes that are about 2 inches apart, and this center one's about 1 inch. And I'm going to, I don't know if you need to or not, but I'm going to heat this up a little bit, and we're going to see if we can get this gear to move up out. And also the woodruff key right here needs to be taken out, which is a major pain in the butt because it's almost pressed in too. So here we go. Wow, that was not an easy task to do. Holy cow. That is really, really pressed on there tight, that gear. Wow. I give that a cleaning next. So we have our cam gear here that we're going to be putting onto our cam. Our cam itself. So what we got on the end of the cam is you have your cam retainer, this spacer piece, and then you have this little piece of space here as well. So like I said, you have to change the cam because the cam is more for street use, where the marine cam is more for water use, where the RPMs and the exhaust and everything, this is just what I heard online, is that it isn't right for the street, so it just doesn't perform as good. So I got a comp cam. So anyways, so we're going to be heating this up by following the instructions I found on 12bolt.com. The guy actually put a video on how to do this. So we're going to heat this up to 475 is what he said to do. Paint it black so then you could use your IR gun to see what the temperature is. And right now, it's at 53 degrees right now. So then we take that and we're going to hammer it on to the end of the cam here. So we're going to heat it up and get started. Okay, there it is. It's on there. And the retainer still spins in the back. And it has very little, it's got just a smidge of play. Probably about 4 thousandths is what I measured from the plate to the spacer or whatever. About 3/4 thousandths of an inch. So it's pretty tight in there to keep it in place. So cam gear is now on. Also, when you go and do it, make sure your bump, your timing mark is on the outside. Make sure you don't put it on backwards. It kind of like, it's actually domed this way and concave that way towards the cam. So keep an eye on that. So we're going to talk about the cam bearings now. So here they are here, and on the front of the engine, here it is here, where the cam bearings are. There's 3 of them in there for the cam. So, and you have 1, 2, 3. They have special locations. They're actually called out on the box right here where they go. So you got 1 and 2 are the same, which is the front of the engine. 1 and 2, they're the same, but the third one, which is the back one, is a little bit different. So you got, we'll look at the, first we'll look at the, we'll go to the middle bearing. I already marked all of these, but you see here, there's an oil hole right here. You see the oil hole? We have to line that oil hole up with this oil hole down inside here. So I got a tip from 12 Bolt Tom. He's on YouTube. He has a better detailed video of this, but I'm just going to show you a quick overview. So what you do first is you get a straight edge. You take it, put it through your cam holes here. A little harder to do it by myself. So then what you do, as you can see, I'll show you this one here. You make a line showing where the, you can see that at all because everything's so dark. Here, you see that line? I drew a line right here using the straight edge to get to the center of the hole. So we're marking the center of the hole of the oil, center of the hole of the oil back here, and also the same up here, okay? So we have that line. We could take our roller back out. Put that to the side here. We don't need that anymore. So we take one of our bearings here, and you take another straight edge, and from your oil hole, you draw a little line right into the center of that hole coming straight out, okay? So then you take this. This is the tricky part. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but again, check out 12 Bolt's video and you'll see a better explanation than what I'm doing. So then you line up this line here inside your bearing with the line you just drew right there. So you have a line here and there. So when you go, then once you have that line, those double lines lined up on the inside, you do a marker line up at the top. So you can see here, that top line here lines up with that line, because once we put the bearing press to install this, we won't be able to see where our hole is down here. So this is all to line up. So then when we go to pound this in, it's lined up in the right direction, okay? So that's just a general overview. Definitely look up 12 Bolt Tom on YouTube, and he has an excellent explanation with a lot better views on it than I am. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a bearing press tool that I bought off of Amazon. And it's just a simple tool. It just helps you pound in and put the bearings in. So I'm going to show you how to do, I'm going to do that next. So, okay, so this is the end of the tool. And here's our bearing. We have our lines where we marked everything and all that. So this kind of goes onto here. Just kind of, the O-ring kind of holds it in place. Geez, oh man. Make things way too tight. So this goes on to the end of this rod. And here's the rod piece that you use. This kind of centers it in the hole at this end. And this end's for pounding it in and everything. So let's see here. So there's no bearings in right here and right here. We're putting in the last bearing. So let's put a little oil in there. Just so it's not going in completely dry there. Okay. So you take the tool, feed it through. Then we take this and put it on the end of the rod. And we take our lines that we marked on the top and we're going to line it up with our marks. So when we start hitting this, it goes into a straight line, the straight where we want it to be. Find a hammer. And since it's tight on there, you can kind of turn this a little bit to make sure you line it up straight. And this end of the tool down here, if you can see, it kind of centers itself. It's got a cone on here. So it centers straight. So when you tap that in, whew, that's a tight bearing to get in there. Holy cow. Alright, let's see if it lined up. I have it just on the edge there. I'm not sure if I'm in there the whole way. Well, it's lined up with it. The bearing looks pretty clean still. I don't think the tool scraped it or anything. Nice. The bearing looks better than the one I took out. So now the bearing's inside there, and we're lined up with the little oil hole right there. So that little marking of the line works pretty good, I have to say. So I'm pretty happy with that. Cool. All right, so I'm going to go and do this one, and then I'll do this one. And this one here, a special note, you actually have to pound it in a little bit further because you have a little hole right here. This is your oiler hole. When it pressurizes the oil inside here, it pushes oil over to here and sprays out this little nozzle that lubes up your timing gear here all the time. So there's a little hole here, so we're going to have to pound that in a little bit further inside. But pretty happy with that. So let's see how the other two turn out. I'll be right back. Now all three cam bearings are in, and all the holes line up pretty good. I have to say, I'm pretty happy with that. And over here, I tapped it in a little bit so that hole is showing. Just tapped it in a bit. I tapped it in a little bit, and then I took it apart and looked at it, and I tapped it in some more. So we got a little hole going here. So again, like I said, so it goes over to the oiler over here. So the cams now are in. The bearings look good all across. Oh, also, I didn't show it, but I had to take this freeze plug out. It was on this end. I had to take that out right here. And then I had to take the block off the stand. I had to take this off, the mount. I had to hammer in and put some sealant around it and put some fresh sealant on there and tapped it in. So the cam is done now, the cam bearings. So off to the next thing. All right, thank you. I hope you stayed to the end of the video. Thank you very much. Like and subscribe, follow along. And the next video, we're going to continue on. Probably we're going to install the crank itself. And we're going to do the caps. We're going to get all that stuff, get all that done. And whatever else goes along with the engine. We'll see what happens in the next one. But thank you very much. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay awesome because you are awesome. Okay, bye-bye.